Hello everyone and welcome to His Author's Voice. And I am the author, Jack Sanger. Where do the great writers get their ideas? In Something Different, Something Inside You, another of the stories on this channel, I suggest the presence of a super atom that is timeless and inoculates the mind with creative potential. Well, anyway, here's a story about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Before there was Sherlock Holmes. She always thought the lift in her apartment block was straight out of a Hitchcock horror movie. The black iron grille doors, the deco lighting, the upholstered sitting bench, and the rusty screeching as it came to a halt on each floor. But she couldn't complain. Carrying the weekly shop up 6 flights of stairs to the top floor would have been a pain. Given its age, and that the lift had no reciprocal twin, residents had to wait for it to rise to the top floor before it descended to collect downward-bound passengers. This meant that she might pass residents on lower floors waiting patiently as she ascended. She would see their feet first, and slowly her gaze would move up their bodies until their faces were revealed. Over time she recognized all the residents below her at the first glimpse of their footwear. Martha Hudson had spent the weekend at a digital history conference on creating virtual tours of significant past events. Her presentation on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and his fascination with the paranormal had been very well received. It was in some ways a fitting tribute to her late husband, who was a pioneer of the virtual history movement in museums. For weeks prior, she had been immersed in everything Conan Doyle. She pressed the brass and ceramic button on the ground floor. The double criss-crossed iron concertinas jutted apart and she stepped inside. She pressed the 6th and top button, lighting the tiny bulb at its centre, and slowly the doors imprisoned her. With the usual protesting groans, the lift set off upwards. There were no feet visible on the lower floors, and as they passed the 5th, she anticipated the usual deceleration. It was very late, and she was slightly on edge because of the hour. But there was no slowing down. A pang of fear fired through her nervous system. She saw the 6th floor carpet come into view, then the darkened hall with the nightlight. But instead of coming to a halt, the lift proceeded at exactly the same speed. The ceiling passed below her, and another floor appeared, then another and another. Clutching a handrail, she stared at the wall plate with the brass and ceramic buttons. They were lighting up in sequence over and over, as though they were proceeding through tenement building after tenement building, piled one upon the next. Staring through the ironwork at the passing floors, she discerned that each block of 6 floors was different, unique in construction, decor, and lighting. Being a historian, she could see that she was passing backwards through the decades, as though the lift was mounting inside a column of inverted time. Her brain, now following familiar historian patterns, allowed some sense of logic to prevail, and her nerves quietened a little. Finally, the lift slowed and halted. After a minute of silent waiting, her eyes searched the scene beyond the doors, her fingers unclasped from the rail. She pressed the button and the metal grills swung silently apart. As new, she thought, and then, examining them closely, realized that they were new. The hall was lit by a gas lamp. It was dark outside, and she could see nothing through the end window. She stepped onto the hallway, and as she did so, had a strange sensation of an untying of her mind from her body, leaving it behind, somehow moored to the lift and floating away from it. Disembodied was the word. She found herself pulled by some magnetic force towards what should have been the door to her apartment. With the habit of years, her hand went to her shoulder bag for the key, except it didn't. It was but a strange memory echoing in her thoughts, as there was no handbag or hands or anything else of physical substance. She was a wraith, an apparition. As she reached the door, she could make out a murmur of voices inside. She hovered there as though waiting for an invitation to enter. She heard a woman's clear voice calling out, "Spirit friend, manifest yourself. Spirit friend, manifest yourself." It was joined by another deeper man's voice intoning the same request. Suddenly the door seemed to dissolve, and she drifted into the room. There was low lighting. Burning incense sticks were thickening the air. A woman in a black velvet gown with a sun, moon and stars motif sat on one side of a table. Her hair was long, straight and black, her face pale with a slightly olive colouring, and her closed eyes were dark shadows. Opposite her sat a well-dressed, middle-aged man, somewhat fleshy, but bronzed, with a handlebar moustache. His hands were laid flat, palms down upon the table, and hers rested lightly upon their backs. His eyes were also closed. Martha hovered over the centre of the table. "Ah, you have come to us. Thank you," said the woman softly. The pair opened their eyes and looked up. Martha could read their thoughts like text on a computer screen. She saw that their eyes viewed the white mist above them, but could not make out her actual form. "What is your name?" asked the woman. "Mrs. Martha Hudson," she replied softly. "Why have you called me?" "To know the future," the man broke in quickly. "And who are you?" Although her apparition's voice asked the question, Martha knew who it was. She had gathered together all known images of him in her recent research. "I am Arthur Conan Doyle." "Yes, the writer," was the flat statement. "What? Writer, you say? But I am a mere scribbler of thoughts. I am a qualified doctor of medicine, even a botanist, but I am not yet convinced I have a real calling to be a writer. I admit I do indulge in such a fantasy, but—" "Are you saying I will become a writer?" "Be true to yourself," she said. Upon these whispered words, she found herself outside the room, being pulled back to the lift, the doors snapping to, and the lift falling steadily through all the floors it had mounted minutes before. Her key was already in her hand, and she entered the apartment, half expecting to see the pair huddled over a table. But all was exactly as she'd left it before her weekend away. She threw her bags on the floor and collapsed on the sofa, white-faced, brain in a turmoil, truly shaken by the experience. Was it a hallucination brought on by fatigue? Was it lucid dreaming? Was it? She tried to shrug the thought away, but it persisted. Time travel? On the coffee table in front of her was a rare copy of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's first successful Sherlock Holmes novel, The Sign of Four, published in 1890. She opened it abstractedly at random, and there, highlighted by her sudden focus, was the name of Sherlock Holmes's landlady. She laughed, shaking her head. It was the elephant in the room, the all too obvious, and yet she had not thought of it until this moment. Martha Hudson closed the book, lay back, shut her eyes, and took several deep breaths. Well, there we are. That was Before There Was a Sherlock Holmes. I hope you enjoyed it. There are several stories that play around with time in this way on this channel. The earliest I wrote is called The Girl Who Taught Darwin Evolution. Another one is The Neanderthal. And a third is The Wasp's Nest. In fact, if you go to the playlist Sci-Fi, it has many stories that play around with notions of a malleable time and entanglement. If you like being read to, there are several dozen stories now to fill your boots, if that is not too mixed a metaphor. Meanwhile, please hit the subscribe button and you'll get advanced warning of more tales as they arrive in my consciousness. After all, my consciousness is not really mine. It is merely a conduit to the great reservoir of thought that we all belong to. Hope you come back for more stories. You might also go to my website, www.jacksanger.com, and there you can download for free novels, plays and short stories. Or you can make a donation. So that's all for now. Remember to subscribe. See you soon. Go in peace. Bye-bye.